Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel here. As the ones that watch me regularly would know, I have been doing a new kind of content where I take a look at building theoretical computers on websites that are stores. And so far I've done Amazon, and I've also done a new store in America called Jawad.gg. And today I'm going to be looking at a South African store, since I am a South African, and I've been getting some requests to do some local content to make some PCs for South Africans. And so I thought I would start with that series today. It doesn't mean I'm abandoning the Amazon series. I still have plans for an eBay series and other stores as well. It's just I'm taking a break from that and starting to work on this. It's basically the same thing. It's just this is local content to South Africa, but it might be interesting to Americans to see what prices are like in other countries. Because at the end of the day, almost none of these parts get made in America anyway. So it's interesting to see what the prices are in different regions, with importing costs being variant to different countries. And so with that in mind, let's build a 10,000 Rand PC today, for obviously for a local South African. And this PC is sort of like, it's just above entry level, so to say. So it's sort of like almost mid-range. The thing about computers these days is the graphics card sort of defines most of what the PC's performance is in terms of games. And so you would never say a PC that has a Ryzen 5500 is a like a high-end PC. But the thing is, like, if you take a 5500 and you put in a 3090, the performance is going to be high-end performance. And so these days CPUs don't hold back computers in the same way that they did maybe 10 or 12 years ago, 10 or 15 years ago. And so I think it's interesting then to build computers, because obviously if you have a 4-core CPU, that's a different thing. But even 6-core CPUs now are performant enough to where you can start playing 2K and 4K games even. So with that said, this isn't going to be a high-end PC. This is just between entry-level and mid-range. And for the price of 10,000 Rand, I think this is going to be quite a good PC. And again, as I mentioned, if you upgrade the graphics card, it'll push to ultra graphics from mostly medium. So with that said, let's take a look at the components. First off, we have the CPU, and it is the one that I just discussed. It is the AMD Ryzen 5 5500. And this is a 6-core 12-thread CPU, and it is, as I just mentioned, where you don't really need much more than this if you're just going to game. And I know that's kind of like a controversial statement, because a lot of people will tell you, no, you need to have the latest 8-core CPU to have ultra performance and, get those high refresh rate frames and things. And maybe that's true to an extent, but if you're just going to be playing at HD, even 2K, and you just want to get around 100 frames, regardless of the graphics card, now I just mean in terms of the CPU power, then something like this is going to be good enough for you at the end of the day. Now, obviously, the thing with this CPU is that it doesn't have an APU. It is a discrete CPU, so you do need a graphics card with this. But when you're looking at gaming systems, you won't really use APUs for the most part anyway. So this is the CPU we're going with. I like the CPU. I think it's good. Now, you can go a little bit cheaper, like around maybe 1,600 Rand if you're going for a Ryzen 3. But for the price difference, it doesn't make sense to downgrade to 4 cores. And then you're going back to Zen 2. This is a Zen 3 CPU. And so I just think if you can afford the extra maybe 800 Rand that this costs, I think you should go for it, because the performance gain is a lot more than the price gain, so to say. So that's it for the CPU. Let's take a look at the motherboard. I'll be honest, I just went for the cheapest motherboard that I could find that supports a AM4 platform, with Ryzen 5 CPUs, third gen, fifth gen Zen 3 CPUs. And the reason for that is when you're playing games, especially on a graphics card that is not a high-end graphics card, the motherboard, it's an important component because it houses everything, but motherboards these days are sort of like CPUs. They aren't really any bad ones when you buy them from reputable sites. They aren't like, they all have good build quality, good component quality. Most of them have military grade capacitors and things like that. So the only real differences now are things like built-in Wi-Fi modules, extra DIMM slots, full speed capacity for PCI and NVMe and things like that. But you know, when you're not using it as a work computer or a sort of like a design computer, it's really not necessary to have the full speeds. And people will say it's heresy that I'm saying that, but at the end of the day, it just isn't necessary. You know, just 10 years ago, we were all still running games from hard drives. Now, the difference with SSDs are massive. And if you're not bothered about the best and the latest, then a motherboard like this will suit you just fine. It's still a really good quality motherboard. It is ASUS. And yeah, it will definitely do the job. Now, the only thing with this is, of course, it doesn't have more than one NVMe slot. So that might be an issue. And for something like this, before buying this, always make sure that it will support the latest generation of CPU if you're going for something like a 5th gen CPU, which I just realized I didn't actually do. So I'm not actually sure if this will run a 5th gen CPU. Let's see. Yeah, I might just be missing it. But if it doesn't, just supplement this for some. Let's take a look. The price difference going from this to this is basically 500 Rand, 590 Rand. Let's see. This supports the 7000 series of AMD CPUs as well, and DDR5 memory. It's not very expensive for supporting those things. So if you go and you make sure that your motherboard supports the correct generation of CPU that you need, or if you can find information about it just needing a BIOS flash to be able to support it, just make sure that you have that information, because I'm not 100% sure that this motherboard does support 5th gen. Which is my mistake, but let's just, for the sake of this video, say that it does. But if you do plan on buying these parts, just make doubly sure that it will support 5th gen, because I'm not actually sure that it will. And if it doesn't, then go for something like this that out of the box states it does support the latest generation. Let's see if this supports 5th gen. This seems to only support 7th gen. So I don't know about the motherboard, but the point is, just make sure that it supports the motherboard that you needed, the CPU that you needed to support. Okay, but I've wasted a bunch of time on the motherboard now, so I am going to get to the RAM. And we are going with Kingston Fury Beast DDR4 CL18 3600 megahertz. This does have a heat spreader on it. It looks pretty cool. And it's just generally good RAM. Kingston do make good RAM. They've been making RAM since before I was born, I think. And they've always been a good player in the RAM space. So, yeah, not too much to say about this. Same thing with RAM these days. Most RAM is okay if you buy it from a reputable company and a reputable site. For games these days, 16 gigs is sort of like the standard now. And anything above, you know, for speeds, just aim for 2666 and above. This is what's available on Evetech, so I'm going for this, and this is 1000 Rand. So good RAM will serve us well in this computer. Now, the main guy on display, the graphics card. It's a little bit difficult in South Africa to get a lot of options with budget graphics cards. And so I went for this because it's, as far as RX 6500 XTs go, this is quite a good price for a new one. Because secondhand they go for about 3,000 and this is 4,000 new. Now it is on sale, but Evetech always have sales on, so you'll always be able to find something like this. And this is the Sapphire Pulse RX 6500 XT. And this card is one of those ones that's sort of divisive because for the price it's pretty impressive, but of course it doesn't have the full bandwidth and it's a limited card in terms of performance. But if you're someone that just wants to play games at HD and you are okay with gaming at medium or high in some cases, this will serve you well. And you know, when you compare this to something like a 1630, this is just going to come out on top so much. I think it'll mostly beat the 1650 as well. So yeah, I would always go for something like this. Unfortunately, you won't be able to stream with this because it doesn't have any sort of encoding support. And so that's just something to keep in mind. If you do want to stream, you should probably go for an NVIDIA card. They just have the best decoders with the NVENC encoder. But if you just want to play games, just want to enjoy yourself, this will serve you fine. So yeah, this is 4,000 Rand and this is what we're going with. Okay, going to the SSD. Now Evetech have some good prices with SSDs. They always have sales running, and that's the thing about Evetech that's pretty attractive, is they always have sales. And they deliver like basically across the whole country, so that's also pretty attractive. And we are going for the Hikvision E3000 512 gig. This is an NVMe drive, and it's not the fastest one, but it's not the slowest. It's sort of like in between in terms of speeds, but again, for gaming, this is going to be more than fine. And this is only 500 Rand, which is a really good price. Not too much to say about this. It's a SSD, it's an NVMe drive, and Hikvision do make good products. Moving on to the case, this is one I purchased recently, so if you want to see it in action, go back a couple of videos and you'll see from the thumbnail, you'll see I did a video on this. This is a case I really like. I'm a big Evetech fan. I think they make really good quality stuff for really low prices. Yeah, I'm just super impressed with this case. It's got a lot of good features. Unfortunately, it does have these breakout pins, but it comes with 3 fans, as you can see. It has this air ventilation at the front. It looks really cool. It has a tempered glass panel, and it has a basement as well for power supply, and it has 3 more spaces for fans. So this is a case that I really like. I think it looks amazing. It doesn't take a lot of space, and if you have the hardware to support a case like this, I would definitely recommend it. And it's discounted at only 600 Rand, which is an amazing price for this. And then lastly, the power supply. Now, this is the cheapest power supply on the site, and it is incidentally a 600 watt. There's a 500 watt Gumdias power supply that's more expensive, but this is on sale, so I think that's why the pricing is what it is. It says it meets 80% efficiency. Now, that doesn't really mean too much because it doesn't have a rating. But, you know, these components are really low wattage, low performance components, so it's not like we don't even need this. We could probably like just buy a cheap 400 watt unit or even a 350 watt and still be fine. So this is overkill for this PC, but this does allow you to upgrade to something like a 6600 XT in the future, or if you're going NVIDIA, to maybe like I don't know, like a 3060 maybe. And so it's good to have that little bit of future upgradability. And as far as pricing goes, this is the cheapest on the site, so this is just what I went with. And it looks really cool as well. It kind of fits with the aesthetic of the case, because it's this RGB and then this front ventilation with these sort of like slanted holes, and this kind of has like a similar thing going. Now, even though this does have a basement, so it doesn't matter too much, but if you care about aesthetics and want to make sure it lines up like at the back, then this will look nice, and you can switch off the lighting for the power supply from a button at the back, which is I've never actually seen before. That's pretty cool. But yeah, that's it for the parts. I think this will be a pretty good PC. HD gaming, medium settings, sometimes high settings. It'll be a good PC just for enjoying yourself. So with that said, I'm going to go on to the pricing now. In the previous videos, the Amazon ones, I did sort of like a spreadsheet, but I figured it's not really necessary when I don't have affiliate links, because I don't think Evetech has an affiliate program. So I'm just going to I just added everything to my cart, and I'll just discuss the pricing there. So yeah, with that said, let's move on to the pricing discussion. Let's do it. Okay, getting into the pricing discussion quickly. There's not too much to say. I'm just going to go over the components and what they cost and whether those prices are competitive in regards to industry standard and other stores. So the AMD Ryzen 5 5500 processor, this is a 6-core 12-thread processor. It's going to work perfectly for this computer, and it leaves a little bit of room for upgradability. It has that 19 megabyte game cache, L3 cache, and it pulls 65 watts. That's sort of what it's rated for. This is a Zen 3 3rd gen processor, and it does come with that Rave Stealth cooler, which is a really cool looking and cool cooler. So that's all good. Coming in at a price of 2,300 Rand. And I think that's quite a good price. These go for a little bit more than that overseas, so I'm very happy with that price locally. Coming down to RAM. Now, RAM is something that's been dropping a lot in price over the last 5 or so years. A couple of years ago, it was pretty expensive to get RAM, of course, depending on where you shop, but it was more expensive than it is now, that's for sure. Because now you can get, for 1,000 Rand, you can get a quality kit of DDR4. Now, this doesn't have RGB or anything, but for another 200 Rand or so, you can add RGB to the heatsink as well. And this is Kingston Fury Beast 16 gig CL18 3600 megahertz. So it's really good RAM, and it's going to be perfect for this. As for the motherboard, Asus Prime B450M K2. Now again, as I said, before purchasing a motherboard and a CPU, always make sure that it supports the CPU. I don't want to be liable if you purchase something and it doesn't support it. So if this motherboard doesn't support Zen 3 CPUs, check if there's a firmware update, or not firmware, but a BIOS update for it to be able to support it. And if there's not, find a motherboard that does support it. But as I said, motherboards are motherboards these days. They're all sort of standard, and they all are around this price. So it's not a bad price, it's sort of like a standard price. Okay, the SSD, this is a very good price. It's sort of like a medium speed. It's got that 3D NAND flash type of memory, and it is, you know, it's sort of like a standard drive these days, but for the price it is amazing. As for the case, this is one of my favorite cases right now, and you can't beat this price. I mean, it's under 1,000 Rand for a really high quality case that comes with 3 fans, so that's very impressive. Power supply, again, very good price, 600 watts. Comes with that addressable RGB if you care about that, and it's under 1,000 Rand, so that's also very impressive. And finally, the graphics card, 4,000 Rand. 4 gigs of GDDR6 memory. It has AMD's RDNA 2 technology, so you are able to use FSR and things like that. And for a RX 6500 XT, 4,000 Rand is a very good price. So overall, I'm very happy with the pricing. Comes to a total of 10,522 Rand if you pay by EFT. But regardless of that, I think it's a very good price. Most stores will charge you around 12 to 13 for a PC like this. So Evetech came through on this one. I think it's a very good price, and I think you'll be hard pressed to find a PC like this for this price. Second hand, you'll pay maybe around 6,000 or 7,000 for a PC like this. So it makes more sense to just buy it new and have all of the warranties. So that's it for the pricing. I'm going to take a quick look at the theoretical performance that we would get from a PC like this, and then we'll just conclude and just talk about the value that this PC offers for the price. So that's it for this section of the video. Let's move on to the next one. Let's do it. Okay, taking a look at the in-game performance of a PC like this. These are theoretical benchmarks. They were done by some random YouTuber that I found, and these are sort of just, as you can see, they used the Afterburner software to record this, and yeah, it's a good thing for us to go off theoretical performance because these are the exact components that we would use. Now there is some leeway because it's not the exact brands and speeds of the RAM, for instance, or stuff like that. So there's a little bit of leeway, but let's just give for 1 or 2 frames. It's basically going to be the same. And for Dirt 5, we are getting 62 frames in this frame. Now this is running at HD medium, so it still looks really good, and getting around 60 FPS is what we are after for a computer like this. Sometimes you'll drop to 40, sometimes you'll gain to 80. So 60 is sort of like the middle ground that we'll have. And yeah, I think this is quite a good result, and it's more than playable. Next up, we have God of War, also running at medium. This is using almost all of the VRAM. Yeah, these games are all going to use around all of the VRAM that we have. That's the thing about these cards, is these days it's better to go for 8 gigs, but sometimes for under 5,000 Rand you just can't do it unless you go second hand. But nonetheless, using almost 4 gigs of VRAM and 10 gigs of RAM, but getting 66 FPS at medium settings is really good. It's sort of like similar to what a Series S would do in terms of performance, for maybe a little bit worse, but that's sort of like the benchmark. So yeah, very happy with the performance on the first 2 games. God of War, 66 FPS. Now we don't have the averages here, but we'll just take a look at the frames in the specific recorded frames. For Need for Speed Unbound, the newest Need for Speed game, 77 FPS. This is running at low HD. I do keep in mind that we aren't using FSR for any of this because I like to do just, you know, original organic benchmarks. I don't like to do frame generation or anything like that for these kinds of tests because those things just give so much leeway to performance. It could push the performance up to 100 frames, but it will look different. So I just do organic, original benchmark numbers. So yeah, again, you can see the VRAM is almost maxed out. RAM, this one uses quite a lot of RAM, 12 gigs, but almost 80 frames. So you could probably play this at medium as well if you're just aiming for that 60 FPS. Okay, next up we have a new one in the benchmarks, Ready or Not. And this is a good look at just FPS numbers for an FPS sort of game. We are getting 84 FPS in this frame, and this is running at high, so that's pretty impressive. It's quite a good looking game as well. But yeah, this is just a testament to you don't need the newest and the latest to play new games. So yeah, I think this is a good result. Next up we have Spider-Man Remastered, not Miles Morales, the previous one, and this is going to get around 50 FPS. This is running at high, so you can push it down to medium. There's a lot of settings in this one that you can change, so you can get a sweet spot for yourself for performance. But again, the VRAM is sort of holding us back here, but we can play the latest and greatest games, and we can play them at close to 60 FPS. If you're willing to drop the graphics, you can definitely reach 60 FPS in a game like this. And that's it for the benchmarks. I think overall the PC did quite well in terms of just HD performance, aiming at that mid-spec performance, aiming to get sort of console equivalent numbers, because that's sort of like the challenge these days with computers, is now with the Series S, which I know a lot of people say is like a failed console, but I think to countries like South Africa it's actually a really good thing, because that console costs under 7,000 Rand new. This computer is just above 10,000 Rand, and this computer's performance doesn't match that console's performance. Now, of course, there's a lot more you can do with a computer. I mean, you can use it for admin work, for design work, for, as a workstation. You can use it as an office. You can use it for whatever. But if you're just focusing on gaming, as we are, this won't beat a Series S. It'll come close, but it won't beat it. And these days you can plug keyboard and mice into consoles as well. So it's just, if you just want a game, you can't really say that there's a reason to get a PC if you are on that ultra budget end of the spectrum there. If you're moving into mid-spec, then I think PCs are better because they offer more performance for a better price than, say, the Series X. But when it comes to competing against the Series S, it's a little bit difficult to beat it price-wise. And that's because Microsoft they take a loss on their consoles, but they make it up through games. But a lot of people are very negative about gaming these days. But I think we're in like the golden age of gaming right now, because you have never been able to get parts for these prices. You've never been able to get games for these prices. You can still outright own your games and not stream, you don't stream them, but you can own them and purchase them and things, but you don't have to. If you just want to play games, finish them and move on to the next one, you can get a subscription service, and that's a new thing for gaming, and I think it's a really good thing. But I'm getting pretty sidetracked now. The point of the video was the computer. We'll make a video about gaming itself another time, but as for the computer, I think it offers exceptional value. I think this graphics card should be a stopgap. I don't think it should be the one you purchase for the next 5 years. So if you can add another 2,000 and go for just that upper tier graphics card like a 6600 XT, that's going to serve you a lot better. But even if you do go with this, you won't not be able to play anything. You just won't be able to tune the graphics up to the maximum. So with that said, I think the PC performs well. I think it's going to look amazing. It's going to at the end of the day, there's nothing like playing games on a computer. And the thing about computers are as well, you can plug in your remotes, and it can be like a console as well. So computers do beat consoles in that department, but overall, the Series S is a little bit difficult to beat in terms of price to performance. But if you do want to go with the computer, something like this will serve you well, and it won't break the bank. So that's it for the 10,000 Rand computer. It was a little bit more expensive, but not much. So overall, I'm pretty happy with it. And I think Evetech are looking good in terms of prices at the moment. Let me know what you think of the content. If you're a South African, hopefully you like this kind of content. If you're from a different country, hopefully it's interesting to see what prices are like in different countries. And just hope you enjoyed the content. Like and subscribe. Let me know if there's anything else you want me to cover. And let me know if you would do anything differently. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.